Hello, everyone. As an introduction to Earl's talk, I'll tell you a little bit about how I acquired the 1565 edition of Herodotus, and talk about how it could affect our organization in the future. I'm not qualified to talk about the details of how it may have served as a source book for Shakespeare, so I'll be happy to leave that to Earl and the experts. But first about the book, it's a 1565 translation of Herodotus of the Greek history of the Greek and Persian Wars by Matteo Maria Boiordo. He was born in 1440 and lived to 1494 and is considered the first major narrative poet of the early Renaissance, Italian Renaissance. He completed the translation about 1490, and there were 5 editions published between 1533 and 1565. This final edition was published in Venice in 1565 and are morally bound, with a bore on it, for Oxford. Records show that de Vere spent 1565 Carnival in Venice and was there until late in the year of 1565. So the timing is perfect, and there's really no controversy about whether this was bound for him. So how did I come to own the book? Well, in May of 2019, when we were alerted to the book going to auction, members quickly organized an SOF campaign to raise the necessary funds to acquire it. The group, led by Don Rubin, cobbled together about $12,000, I think, and we felt that was going to be enough to cover the purchase because that was the indication from the auction house. They estimated it would go for $9,000 to $12,000. So it's interesting because there are many other editions of this same book, obviously not bound for Oxford, but the same edition from 1565 that are in several libraries, universities, and private collections, but their value is nowhere near even the $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 that was estimated it would be sold for on auction. In fact, last week I found one that was available for 620 euros. And in 2015, this exact volume sold for about $7,000. So the question is, how did I come to own this book? Well, aside from the obvious, what does it mean that I spent $60,000 for this book? Well, it's a good question. In my defense, I want to talk about investment value for a minute. And I'll tell you, I didn't think of this during the auction or beforehand. It was really trying to figure out afterwards when I owned it how I could possibly have paid $60,000 for it. And really, what it was is during the 60 to 90 seconds, this intense auction process, I just couldn't accept the idea of these stodgy old men smugly tucking it away in some vault somewhere and keeping it away from the eyes of the people who want to examine it and who believe that it was owned by Shakespeare. So whether this edition sold for $12,000 or $60,000, its extraordinary value, this particular volume, only can be because it was owned by Shakespeare. That's what makes it as valuable as it is. When you hold this book and you think about it being held by Shakespeare, it gives you, it sends you back in time, and it just gives you a feeling of seriousness and importance and depth. And that unique feeling, I think, is what people look for when they visit places that celebrities or famous people have visited. And they pay enormous sums for autographs, for instance. So I decided to check on the value of some autographs of important people in history. And to do that, I referred to this book. This is the book that actually first alerted me to Edward de Vere being Shakespeare. It's titled, it's Michael Hart's The 100. And in this book, Michael Hart ranks what he considers the 100 most influential persons in history. And he has brief explanations for his rationale, along with a brief biography on the person. So Edward de Vere, Shakespeare, is number 31 in this book, the 31st most influential person in history. So I was curious when thinking about the value of this book, what is the value of other autographs of other people from the 100 most influential people? So to give you an idea, I found a financial document signed by Isaac Newton that sold for $23,750. And you can find Adam Smith for about 100,000, Rene Descartes for about 150,000, Beethoven for 140,000. For Galileo, bidding starts at $1 million. Then I looked up Shakespeare, and sure enough, I found that Shakespeare's autograph is one of the rarest autographs. And this is an article I found. In this article, it says the world's rarest autograph. And it goes into some detail. I'll go into that in just a minute. The idea of Shakespeare's autograph being the rarest, of course, as we all know, there are only 6 of them. And this article actually could be a little description of why we should be doubting the Shakespeare authorship. It says, it is one of the more devastating twists of history that all of Shakespeare's written manuscripts were lost long ago. Should the text for Romeo and Juliet, or As You Like It, ever turn up, its value would be inestimable. You might expect the greatest writer ever to have lived to have excellent handwriting, and it points out that, of course, he didn't. Another quote from this article says, some of the Shakespeare writes in a peculiarly wobbly hand and writes his name differently each time. Shakespeare, it was quite, he spells it 6 different ways. It was quite common to abbreviate your name. It was not quite common to abbreviate your name the way he did. So anyway, Shakespeare's autograph is amongst, or the rarest in the world. So if we look inside this book, just inside the title page here, it may not be easily seen from there, but there's an inscription. It says in Latin, to Berkeley, a gift from the illustrious Edward, Earl of Oxford. So here we have what we believe is Shakespeare's autograph. We're all working in our own way to have Edward de Vere recognized as Shakespeare, and I think that's really the purpose, the primary purpose of our organization. I still remember reading or watching the Frontline documentary with Charlton Ogburn, and something touched me very deeply about how badly he wanted Edward de Vere to be recognized as Shakespeare, and just how desperately he was willing to work for that. He really understood that Edward de Vere deserves to be recognized as Shakespeare. Now that Looney and Ogburn and so many others have passed on, this becomes our job. And the value of this book can become a bellwether of how well we're doing. There's no guarantee that this volume will continue to grow in value. It could be worth 7,000 again. And so at some point in the future. And in my opinion, if we're not building value in the book, then we're losing value in the book. Or if we're not building momentum toward Edward de Vere being recognized as Shakespeare, then we're losing that momentum. So this year I'm co-chairing the fundraising and membership committee with Heidi Janisch, and we're both committed to having a successful year. And that means we've got to make meaningful progress toward getting Oxford recognized as Shakespeare. For that, we'll need to capture people's attention and their imagination and come up with exciting projects that will help people to believe Edward de Vere is Shakespeare, understand the mountain of evidence behind that. And as for the future of this book, I'd really like to see this book in the hands of the fellowship, donated and worth $1 million. And I believe that is the future of this book if we do our job right. That's where I believe it belongs and what Oxford deserves. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ben. Fascinating talk, and thank you again for making the effort to acquire that book. There was a question in the chat regarding whether or not there were any plans to digitize the book and if there were any other annotations in the book.
There are no annotations in the book beyond some names on the cover or the inside cover. So there aren't any notes. And as far as digitizing it, I would be glad to offer it up to anybody who is qualified to do that properly and make sure it's well preserved.